Good evening, everyone. My name is Sharon Erkfitz, and I'm the board-appointed clerk for the Penfield Central School District. The July 13, 2021 organizational and regular meeting of the district is now called to order at 6:38 p.m. Please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Our first order of business is to administer the oath of office to our newly elected board members. Christine Harley, will you please stand to receive your oath of office and raise your right hand and repeat after me? I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America.
I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
And the Constitution of the State of New York.
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
And that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Education
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of the member of the Board of Education
in the Penfield Central School District according to the best of my ability.
in the Penfield School District to the best of my ability.
Thank you. And now for our re-elected board members, Catherine Dean, please rise and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of office of member of the Board of Education
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the Board of Education
in the Penfield Central School District according to the best of my abilities.
in the Penfield Central School District according to the best of my ability.
Mark Elledge. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
I do solemnly swear that I'll support the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of office of member of the Board of Education
and I'll faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of Board of Education
in the Penfield Central School District according to the best of my ability.
in the Penfield Central School District according to the best of my abilities.
All right, thank you. Next tonight, we have to have our election of officers, and nominations will be received for the office of Board President and Vice President. According to Robert's Rule of Order, a second nomination is not necessary. However, if someone would like to second the motion as a sign of support, it will be accepted. After the nominations are closed, a vote will be taken. So the meeting is now open for nominations for the office of Board President for the 2021-22 school year.
I'd like to nominate Mark Elledge as president for the 2020-2021 school year. Did I say that right?
2021.
2021.
Yeah, last year's over.
Wait. For the 2021-2022 school year. Okay.
Do I have a second?
Yes, you do. I second that nomination.
Okay. We have a motion made by Lisa Bonatti-Chidsey, second by Barb Babiars, to appoint Mark Elledge as president of the board. Are there any other nominations? Okay, seeing none, I will declare the nominations closed and call for a vote. All those in favor? Okay, opposed? All right, so Mark, congratulations. You've been nominated the board president for the 2021-2022. So now we have to do another oath. All right, so here we go.
Thank you.
So, yeah. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the State of New York,
I do solemnly swear that I'll support the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of New York,
and I will faithfully discharge the duties of office of President of the Board of Education
and I will faithfully discharge the duties of office of President of the Board of Education
in the Penfield Central School District according to the best of my ability.
in the Penfield Central School District according to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So now we'll take nominations for the office of Board Vice President for the 2021-22 school year. Emily?
Move this out of the way. I nominate Lisa Bonatti-Chitzi for Vice President.
Okay, any seconds?
I second the nomination.
Okay. We have a motion made by Emily Belser and seconded by seconded by Catherine Dean to appoint Lisa Bonatti-Chitzi to Vice President of the Board of Education. Are there any other nominations tonight? Okay, seeing no further nominations, I'll declare the nominations closed and we'll take a vote for Vice President. All those in favor of Lisa Bonatti-Chitzi for Board Vice President? Okay, 7-4, none opposed. So congratulations, Lisa. You're nominated Vice President of the Board of Education for the 2021-22 school year. Our last oath for the evening.
Do I have to say the school year again?
No, it doesn't say the school year. Okay, ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of New York and the Constitution of the State of New York,
I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of Vice President of the Board of Education
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of the Vice President of the Board of Education
in the Penfield Central School District according to the best of my ability.
in the Penfield Central School District according to the best of my abilities.
Thank you. And thank you very much, and I will now turn the meeting over to our new board president, Mark Elledge.
Thank you. It is time to examine the agenda. It is appropriate that the board approve the July 13th, 2021 agenda as submitted. So may I have a motion and a second that the agenda of July 13th, 2021 be approved as submitted.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Now that it's appropriate that the board approve the consent agenda, which includes the approval of the minutes from the June 8th, 2021 meeting as submitted, the acceptance of the recommendations from the Committee of Special Education, the acceptance of the recommendations of the Committee of Preschool Special Education, the acceptance of the recommendations from the Superintendent for personnel changes, the request to approve the bidders that you see listed there, and the approval to request the approval of the request to dispose unserviceable textbooks. May I have a motion and a second that the board approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. It is recommended that the treasurer report, including the cash report, the general fund cash report, the general fund revenue status report, the general fund budget status report, the school lunch fund cash report, and the school lunch fund revenue and expense budget report for the month ending May 31st, 2021 be approved. May I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Which brings us to special reports. The board has invited the general counsel for the district to speak to the overview of the Board of Education procedures and processes. We've invited Ms. Colleen Heinrich, Esquire of Farah Firenze, to come and present us with this information. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Hopefully I'm on. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for choosing to serve as a board member. and volunteering for this important role. One of the common denominators that we see across the state is for every person who serves and sits as a board member is a desire to serve the best interest of our students. So while members may disagree on occasion, one thing that unifies the board and makes a board successful is just continuing to focus on that goal. What the board has asked me, since we are all in the profession of education, is to provide the public and share with the public some information on the role and the responsibilities of a Board of Education. In New York State, it's quite unique. In New York State, we call upon a bunch of lay people to come together and operate a school district with professional educators. It's actually a quite unique and strange system if you think about it. But in New York State, it works. And it works when we all work within the purview of the authority of the Board of Education and recognize the roles and responsibilities of our professional educators. Boards of Education can only operate as a unit. They only have power and authority when a board sits together before you in an open session. No individual board member has any individual authority outside of a board meeting. So it's a concept it's unique to boards of education, and it's something that the public truly doesn't have a grasp of until you see a board operating in public. And the boards of education only have the authority that's granted to them by the state of New York and the New York State legislature under the educational law. So when the board is sitting together, it's fulfilling its duties of providing policy guidance and oversight. And then once it provides that information, it's providing direction to the administration of the district to carry forward those recommendations, policies, and oversight recommendations. The Board of Education doesn't act alone. Boards of Education share their authority with other entities. Board members take an oath of office, and we've heard our oath of offices today, to comply with the rules and the regulations of the state of New York and to follow the recommendations of a number of different agencies that share governing of school districts with the boards of education. This includes the United States Department of Education, the New York State Governor, the New York State Legislature, your Board of Regents, the Commissioner of Education, and the Comptroller, just among some of the entities that have oversight of our school districts. Since board members, as lay people and community members, come to sit on the board, they come to sit on a board with a varied backgrounds, experiences, life experiences, and that's what we want. That's what we want in our boards of education. Rarely does that exclude a board member from fulfilling their obligations. The board is obligated to comply with the provisions of the Public Officers Law and the General Municipal Law with respect to conflicts of interest. Those are specifically set forth in the statute, and there are ways in which board members need to respond to those and how boards respond in each occasions when those instances do arise. As I referenced, the board, this is where the board takes its action, at its public meeting. Its policy and oversight is done in front of the public, and it has a statutory obligation to do that. However, there's no statutory obligation under the law for public comment at a Board of Education meeting. Nonetheless, many boards, and Penfield's Board of Education has chosen to include public comment as part of their agenda as an opportunity for the board and the administration to hear feedback on matters that impact the district students. This is a time for the board to listen, and the board typically will not make statements in response or engage in dialogue with any community members that come up to share information with the board. And the reason for that is it's a time to listen, and the board takes the information that is shared with the community and communicates that to the appropriate administrators district-wide that may be responsible for responding to those community issues or concerns or recommendations or praises that may come before you for that follow-up. Since the board only operates in this venue and only has limited time in which to sit to fulfill its obligations, to ensure an orderly operation of a board meeting, the board may require and does require here speakers to sign up in advance and limits the time on the public agenda for public comment for each individual over the time period on the agenda, and may also limit the amount of time for each speaker to do so. This is not to limit public outreach or public communication. Again, everyone is reminded that individuals, while they may not have an opportunity to speak in public, have an opportunity to share any information with the Board of Education in writing at any time. This platform works only when the community, the board, and the administration work together to model good citizenship for our students. And it's been successful in the history of the state of New York, and hopefully it's successful going forward. And once we keep those goals in mind, it works towards a successful Board of Education, partnership with school district administration and the community. So again, I thank you all for your service and for serving in this important role.
Thank you, Ms. Heinrich. Board members, do you have any questions? So the District General Counsel, Ms. Heinrich, has explained the function of the Board of Education and their meetings as defined by New York State education law. In consultation with Ms. Heinrich, the board will make the following changes to our meeting format to ensure that we can fulfill our business obligations. The visitor speaking time will be held at the end of the meeting once the business meeting portion of the agenda has been completed. Visitors will now have 3 minutes to present their remarks. This is consistent with the time allowed by many school boards and municipalities. Visitor speaking time will be scheduled for 30 minutes, and then starting in August, we will have require visitors to sign up for speaking by 10 a.m. on the day of the meeting. If the person misses that deadline for the meeting, they will be able to sign up to speak for the following meeting. The board will revisit the visitor speaking time format when necessary. And later in the meeting, Dr. Putnam will reference upcoming community conversations. So now it's time for the superintendent's report. Dr. Putnam?
Thank you. We do have several reports this evening. I do have my regular student and staff honors and some Penfield Central School District updates. And then I'll be turning it over to Dr. Maloney and Ms. Potter, who will be walking through a little bit of an intro of New York State's culturally responsive and sustaining education framework. And then to Dr. Driffel for our business updates, as this is our reorg meeting, so lots to go over. And then we'll wrap up with Dr. Maloney with a brief presentation on the professional learning plan. So first, a very positive is we do have lots of new faces this evening. And so just a welcome and congratulations to Assistant Superintendent for Equity and Access, Mrs. Tasha Potter. And our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, Dr. Leslie Maloney. And rounding out our team, our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resource, Dr. Stephen Kenny. I want you to remember that applause when things get hard, because they will. So it's a tough job, and I really appreciate all of you and Dr. Driffel, who wrapped up his first year as a Penfield Patriot at the end of last year, and looking forward to the work and our commitment to Penfield students. And some other positive news is that before the end of the year, the PHS National Honor Society recently held a car wash to benefit the Penfield Food Shelf, and they raised $700 in collected food donations for the food shelf. So once again, just so many examples of our students working through to support needs within our community beyond themselves, and it's just such a great thing that makes Penfield so special. We typically have a student rep on our board, I'll just share, and we do give her summers off. So she will be here in September, but I will relay that we clapped for the Penfield Honor Society, the high school honor society. The other update and honor is Independence Day Parade. Our amazing transportation department staff brighten the day for hundreds of children by dressing as wide varieties of characters for the Town of Penfield's annual Independence Day. There's photos online. It is absolutely wonderful to look at, but you can see from the picture, lots of characters. Those are all our incredible transportation staff. So congratulations. You have to clap for transportation too. And then, just some updates as well. And we really talk about back to school in September. So a lot has happened since the last day of school for kids and where we are today. And so just wanted to update, and as I've always done throughout this school year, the Penfield Central School District update slides really started this year because of the ever-changing rules and regulations around masking and distance and COVID. And so we're still doing these updates, and I think I'll keep them around as we go through for lots of things. But just a little background, on June 25th, the New York State ended the COVID-19 state disaster emergency, and with it, executive orders went as well. I can plug that. July 7th, New York State Department of Health did provide a brief update to schools regarding COVID-19 measures and how they impact schools over the summer. There was lots of confusion because summer camps had different rules than summer schools, and just it really added to the ongoing confusion from New York State. And I appreciate Ms. Heinrich talking about the fact that school boards do have to work with a number of organizations, including the state and their mandates and executive orders. We spent some time between July 7th and today reviewing and getting legal opinion, and Penfield did update their masking rules for summer programming. That doesn't impact a large number of students, but we do run an extended school year program and some academic camps for our elementary school students. And so our updates there is because that youngest age group is unable to be vaccinated, we are doing what most of Monroe County is. We're still working through that, but as of now, as we continue to monitor the situation, we're just asking that our students and staff wear masks when they are less than 6 feet apart. But as soon as they're more than 6 feet, and in much of our extended school year, because there's a small number of kids coming and working with their teachers, we can space them out so we can take masks off, and that we are really doing all we can to offer as many mask breaks as possible. Our extended school year program, the reason we went that direction is our extended school year program is in 2 of the elementary schools that have central air, so they're cooled. And so that also led us to that decision. We're not dealing with the heat as some schools are, such as Indian Landing. We don't have extended school year Indian Landing because I do see a couple Indian Landing teachers, and they know that it gets very warm at Indian Landing, as does Scribner and Bay Trail. So we did do that. We're going to continue to monitor this and look at changes. And then this month, we're really working with General Counsel, working on our reopening advisory committees that will be reaching out to their committee members for planning. And we are anticipating additional guidance from New York State, one way or the other, around what fall should look like. Lots of good news. The CDC is pushing hard that kids should be back in school 5 days a week. They should be in person. These are all great things that we've all wanted. And with the end of the state disaster, the end of some of the executive orders, and some updates from the New York State Department of Health, I do think we're heading in a very good direction. And therefore, our focus is to be able to announce by the end of this month, the first week of August, what fall will look like for Penfield. And we'll communicate as we do through emails from my office to the community. We'll be reaching out to those reopening advisory committees and working through this together to make sure that we follow what we have to follow, but we're also getting kids back to school as quickly, full-time, and as safely as possible. I will say one of the things we've talked about is, we do have a reopening advisory committee around 100% virtual option. As of now, we're not anticipating, and that could change, but we're not anticipating that New York State is going to require districts to offer a 100% virtual option. I want to be very clear. I don't know what New York State's going to do between now and tomorrow morning. So that's been very clear all year long. We have to follow what they tell us, as frustrating as that is. But we want to be open and honest, and we'll be working through this, is that if we're not, and we've said this all year, if we're not required to offer a 100% virtual option, it's going to be very difficult to offer one in terms of staffing and cost. However, we do have current policies for students who have medical needs that we can find a way to support their instruction from home based on medical needs and documentation. So we'll be reaching out with more information as that comes from New York State. So just as we look to fall, some reminders is that we will continue to follow mandates set forth through the executive order by New York State. If there is one between now and fall, we do have to follow it. We'll communicate that. We will, as we always done, review it with legal counsel, make sure we're doing what we need to do to make sure that we are following the rules we have to. But Penfield continues to advocate through the board and through superintendent, through Monroe County school boards and through the Monroe County superintendent organizations. We continue to advocate for local control, which we always advocate for in all aspects, but especially this year, local control around COVID-19 related decision making. We've been clear, and I have in my presentations all year, is that a lot of times they're blanket guidance for the entire state, as opposed to looking back at the local control, which is what we appreciate in New York State. We do believe we're heading in the right direction with the end of the state disaster emergency on June 25th, the updates that came on July 7th. It does feel like we're getting in a spot where there's more and more local decision coming back around COVID and COVID precautions. We're going to continue to monitor infection rates. We do it daily, and we're going to work to create a safe learning environment for students with a focus of 5 days per week in person, because we know that is what is best for students. I will just tell you, sometimes I go off script. I can't help myself. But in the beginning of this pandemic, I will be honest, I said, wow, this is really cool. This virtual stuff, maybe we could do something with this. Maybe we can, find a way. Is this the new? It's not. Like, we need kids in front of teachers. We have the best teachers anywhere that I've ever worked or will work, and they need to be with kids. They need to be with students in the classroom. So, we worked through and did what we had to do, but our goal will be to use all of the guidance we have to follow to make sure we can get kids back to school 5 days a week in front of their incredible teachers. And then conversational education, and Mark mentioned this earlier in his special report. So just as a reminder, Penfield's had a really long history before my time of hosting conversations on education for parents, guardians, and community stakeholders. Most of those pre-COVID were in the auditorium at the high school or in the library at the high school where people could come in. Unfortunately, creating such opportunities this last year for learning in terms of us educating the community on what we're doing, listening, dialogue, which you don't get at a board meeting. Obviously, the board wants to hear people speak, but it's not a dialogue, and that's what's really powerful for learning what we're doing in schools and how we can address your concerns and questions. This year has hindered that greatly. We are really looking forward, and we're already in planning mode for hosting more events as we enter this next school year. You'll hear a little bit later from Tasha Potter and Leslie Maloney that we do have some conversations scheduled throughout the year, really focused around that culturally responsive and sustaining framework from New York State. But we are going to also have our first conversation on education for this school year, and it will take place prior to the next board meeting, which is August 10th. So a date, a time, and details will be forthcoming. We are looking at either having it virtual or having it both virtual and in person, because we have found the one positive for adult meetings is when we can do them virtually, more people can attend. And so that is something that we're looking at. I don't think you need to be with me to feel my magic like the students need with their teachers. However, we're working on that. The focus of that meeting that we're shooting for probably the first week in August, but prior to the board meeting, is going to be our reopening plans, whatever we know at that time for fall, to give people a solid month for planning purposes and decision making. And then we'll also be putting out a Microsoft form to collect questions, and that we will then be able to take those questions in advance and make sure that we have answers so we can add that into our presentation to answer some of the questions that you may have in the community. And then the other piece is, and Ms. Heinrich mentioned this, is you can always reach out to communicate to the board. Anybody can. Students can, staff can, and so can parents and guardians and community members. You can reach out to the board, and you can also reach out directly to district office if it's a bigger question than just your child. Obviously, your child's teacher knows your child, and if it's a question about your child, start at the teacher. You've got the building principal if you need to, but if we're really looking at big questions and overarching questions, the parents in our community, our parents and guardians, our community members seeking information, seeking a dialogue, may contact the Board of Education. If you go on our webpage and go to the Board of Education page, there is a link that will create an email that goes to all of the board members at once. You can also email myself and my incredible team that's sitting up here, our Assistant Superintendent for Business, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Assistant Superintendent for Equity and Access, and Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources. The emails are there, but they're also online. Obviously, you can reach out to us, and over the summer already, I know that many have already met with community members interested in a more of a one-on-one dialogue. So please know that there are always people in the district that are willing to listen and hear and talk through what we're doing in many different areas. Dan loves talking about budget, so if you got a budget question, Dan is your man. And then I have just a slide for questions from the board.
All right, board members, any questions for Dr. Putnam? Catherine?
Hello.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi, haven't seen you in a while. I wanted to ask you just clarification on monitoring infection rates once school is reopened. Would that be testing, or are you just going to be monitoring?
It's a great question, and it reminded me of something else, so I'm glad you asked. Per the state, we no longer need to put, which makes sense because we're not in full-time session. At the end of every day, our nurses had to put in, across New York State, had to put into the COVID dashboard number of new cases for staff and students, and we no longer do that. So I don't foresee the need for testing when school comes back in. And talking with Monroe County Conversations, we don't know if they'd have enough tests to continue that they were doing at the end of last year that Penfield was doing randomized testing. So I think that answered your question. We're not looking at testing in terms of the infection rate. We're really just following the CDC in the Monroe County data dashboard.
Okay, so you're making plans based on what you know now and how things are going now.
Yep.
And the conversations you're having now with the understanding that it could always change if something comes from New York.
Yeah, and so like the most recent CDC guidance, and this is always really fun because there's so many organizations, but like CDC isn't a lawmaking body for schools. They can only offer guidance, and then the New York State Department of Health is able to tell us this is what you need to do. So with the CDC right now, their guidance is really, you've got to be ready to transition if a variant hits your community. If there's a huge spike in positive cases, we as a district need to be able to just be prepared and shift for whatever the guidance could be. I think we really learned a lot this last year. Nobody was prepared for a pandemic, and what we have learned is we need to make sure that we can't just say as a school district is we're good. No more guidance, we'll just go back to normal. We can't go back to normal. We want to make sure that we're at least being proactive in monitoring, working with the local Department of Health, and making sure that we're keeping all students and staff safe.
Okay, thank you.
And then so the last piece is also around the CDC guidance, is really talks a lot about what individuals who are vaccinated can do, their guidance for vaccinated individuals versus non-vaccinated individuals. We don't right now have a mechanism to collect that data for our students and staff, which is why no schools do, which is why we are more, as we looked at the summer, not just saying throw away the masks, but let's go a little slow and just make sure we're being safe as we go through here. That being said, one of the clear things is that if you are vaccinated, then indoor masking is now no longer required. It's a recommendation, which is why I want to acknowledge why many of us up here aren't wearing a mask. It is completely optional. You can. The other reason is we are all adults sitting at this table. We are all making that decision. If I was up here and in between each one of us was a third grader who was too young to be vaccinated, we'd be probably wearing masks. All right, so I just want to acknowledge that. This is a big change, and it's one for me where I still wear a mask in a lot of places when they ask me to. I have no problem wearing one. I don't have to shave as much. However, I also think it's really important in these meetings that you see faces when you talk to the board, that you really see that passion for what we do and the talk through. So again, that guidance is changing, and as we look at adults, the CDC is if you're vaccinated, it's just recommended and not required to wear masks indoors. So that was what I forgot to mention. I'm glad you asked that question.
Okay, great.
Barb?
Dr. Putnam, as the board rep on the virtual committee, where does that stand then?
Yeah, so after, I haven't yet, to be fair, I was away all last week and been playing catch up and in a million meetings on Monday and Tuesday this week. But tomorrow morning, an email will go out to the facilitators of our advisory committees to schedule another meeting. And for the 100% virtual, my plan is to be at that meeting with Jason DeLorenz, who's the facilitator, to at least just walk through that and what it looks like.
And part of this is also because there's so many positives about virtual. Have you heard anything about the possibility of courses that, where you have a difficult time finding a teacher for, could become a virtual thing countywide, or have you heard anything about that?
It's interesting, Barb. There's been a lot of conversation over the last 12 years around the ability for some classes to be taught virtually with students from multiple schools. Penfield actually, when I was building principal, so it's been a while, really started something called the Futures Project, and we presented at it at board meetings, and we actually ran for a year some classes that we were in person. We were in person here at Penfield, but we had students from East Rochester and Gananda and some other districts who were coming in virtually for courses that we offered that they didn't offer. And then we did the same thing where some of our students attended classes in another district virtually for classes we didn't offer.
Right.
That never really, and this is pre-COVID pandemic,
Right.
before anybody was using Zoom. So that didn't really take off just because of the difficulty. There's a lot of rules and regulations around how we can do that. What does it look like? How does finances work? So it was really just an agreement to try it. We do teach our summer health program many times as a hybrid. We took it and do it internally as a hybrid health. We've tried that in the past too. So there is conversations around Monroe County BOCES doing a virtual school. To be honest, there's a lot of cost, and nothing has truly taken off yet.
Okay.
And we were building with BOCES around if it was a requirement, and now that it's not, it's sort of a conversation, and districts are looking at what we can do. But again, I go back to our students who do have medical needs. We do make sure that we educate all students and find a way to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Welcome. I'll turn over, but I just have to say, I will give a shout out to our teachers who are watching, who taught virtual all year, and our Bay Trail teachers who the last 5 weeks taught synchronous with kids in their room and kids at home virtually. They are absolute rock stars, and thank you to those teachers who did that. I would be remiss if I didn't also say thank you to our students who lived through that and their families, because they also are rock stars for doing that. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our new Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction and our new Assistant Superintendent for Equity and Access. And they're going to walk through a presentation on New York State's culturally responsive sustaining education framework from New York State Ed.
Thank you. You need the clicker?
Oh, yes, you do.
Do you want?
Oh, you can click. No problem.
Good evening, everyone. We wanted to start this evening by sharing some information with you relative to New York State's culturally responsive sustaining education framework. And we'll begin with some clarification. So we realize the term critical race theory and culturally responsive teaching have been interchanged because of their acronyms. So in addition to providing some clarification, we want to share definitions with you. Critical race theory is an academic concept studied in legal scholarship by those in postgraduate and graduate academia. Critical race theory analyzes how racism is embedded in legal systems and policies. Whereas when we're talking about culturally responsive teaching, this is an approach that emphasizes and uses the cultural knowledge, prior experiences, frames of reference, and performance styles to make learning encounters more relevant and effective for all of our students. So I'd like to share clarification that the Penfield Central School District is not teaching critical race theory. Our curriculum is based on the New York State standards. However, we are focused on strengthening equity and inclusive practices to ensure that all of our students have a safe environment and feel a sense of belonging and connectedness to our schools. So I want to give you a little background and context about the culturally responsive sustaining education framework. In January 2018, the New York State Board of Regents directed the Office of Pre-Kindergarten through 12th grade education and higher education to convene a panel of experts and engage all stakeholders to develop from the ground up a framework for culturally responsive sustaining education. So the culturally responsive sustaining education is grounded in a cultural view of learning and human development in which multiple expressions of diversity, so this encompasses all of our social identities, such as race, ethnicity, social class, gender, language, sexual orientation, nationality, religion, and ability and disability. We want to ensure that all of these social identities are recognized and regarded as assets for our teaching and our learning. So the New York State Department of Education has shared with us this framework, and they've also provided us with briefs very recently. In the briefs, as well as the framework, they ask and answer these questions. So what is culture? Culture is a meeting point for schools to acknowledge and celebrate cultures. Culture welcomes multiple facets of identity, along with the unique experiences and perspectives. What is culturally responsive sustaining education? Culturally responsive sustaining education asks that we know our students, that we develop positive and meaningful relationships with our students, that we view cultural differences as an asset for teaching and learning and not view these as deficits. Culturally responsive sustaining education asks that we understand that differences should be seen as strengths and maintained because it helps us notice the unique characteristics of our students and our families. What is the culturally responsive sustaining framework? Well, this provides guidelines for stakeholders in public education to understand and implement a framework that incorporates an equity and inclusive lens, recognizes the effect of the school environment on our students' performances, and how this environment helps them to be successful, promotes relationships of trust, provides opportunities for continual professional learning and equity, multicultural, and culturally responsive and sustaining pedagogies. It asks us to engage in critical conversations that will allow our students to think critically. And so now, Dr. Maloney.
Why should schools focus on cultures of their students? Culture, as we've mentioned, includes the multiple components of our identities, including our nationality, race, gender, language, sexual orientation, religion, economic background, and ability. Since we all bring our own uniqueness, schools are meeting points for cultures. All students deserve to feel safe and celebrated while at school. Yesterday, while meeting with a parent, the parent asked, hasn't the school been doing this? And what a great question. And we have, but we can do better. Celebrating, acknowledging, and learning about culture extends beyond traditional practices of experiencing specific cuisine, art, or music to also include ways of thinking, values, and forms of expression. As a school, we need to be more inclusive in the cultures we celebrate, acknowledge, and provide instruction on. Students need to not only experience and learn about cultures other than their own, students also need to experience their culture within the taught curriculum. How does implementing the culturally responsive sustaining framework improve your school community as a whole? When all cultures matter, our students' cultures can be positioned as strengths and as the foundation of empowering, rigorous, and innovative learning. Students are most successful when they feel safe, valued, and connected to school.
So we want to share with you these 4 principles of the culturally responsive sustaining framework. Welcoming and affirming. A welcoming and affirming environment allows our students to feel safe. It allows them to feel represented and reflected. This is a place where we want to embrace all of our students' cultural identities. When we think about high expectations and rigorous instruction, this is where we want to challenge our students. We want to give them opportunities to risk and grow academically, socially, and emotionally. We want our students to have those intellectual challenges.
Inclusive curriculum and assessment, which is representative of all students. It elevates historically marginalized voices. They include opportunities to learn about power and privilege in the context of various communities and empower students to be agents of positive social change. Inclusive curriculum and assessment provide the opportunity to learn beyond one's own scope and work toward dismantling systems of biases and inequalities. What does this look like in the classroom? Incorporating current events into instruction, including student voice in the curriculum design work. Resources to support the curriculum which are written and developed by racially, culturally, and linguistically diverse perspectives. Instructional strategies which adapt to diverse learning styles. Ongoing professional learning. This is critical for the adults who support our students. It is important our faculty and staff have the tools in their toolboxes for this work. What does this training look like? Diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Support aligning curriculum and instruction to the histories, language, and experiences of traditionally marginalized voices. Developing critically responsive, sustaining lessons on the K-12 continuum. How do we approach developing such lessons in curriculum? For years, our curriculum in Penfield has been rooted in the New York State standards, and it still will be. As you see from the graphic, when designing lessons and curricula, teachers will lean on the New York State learning standards, the New York State framework for social studies. That provides what content to teach, the key ideas and conceptual understandings. The social justice standards provide anchor standards in 4 domains: identity, diversity, justice, and action. These standards represent a continuum of engagement in anti-bias, multicultural, and social justice education. The social emotional learning framework with its 5 competencies: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And the culturally responsive sustaining framework, which, as we mentioned, provides the equity and inclusion lens.
So now, as a result of sharing with you just the background and unpacking the culturally responsive sustaining education framework, we also want to share with you that we are in the process of developing, during the course of this year, we've actually had our first meeting with a diversity, equity, and inclusion core team. So this core team will be meeting monthly. The goal is for us to work together to establish a culturally responsive approach that ensures equitable outcomes and access for all of our students. We have invited as stakeholders students, families, district office staff, building representatives, as well as Board of Education members. So the function of this group is to serve as an advisory and a steering committee to develop and ensure that we have equitable systems, structures, policies, and procedures so that we can promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also are looking to develop subcommittees. So these subcommittees will be all facilitated by district office, building leaders, staff from our district. So for curriculum and instruction, we will have Dr. Leslie Maloney. Professional development, we will have Ms. Sheena Conway. Family and community engagement, that will be work that I will support. Our workforce development, Dr. Kenny will lead this subcommittee. Welcoming and affirming environments, this is also an area that we will all share. And diverse schools and learning opportunities, this will be led by our Director of Special Education, Mr. Scott Dreschler. So the goal here, again, is to invite the same stakeholders. We would want to have our Board of Education represented here. We want to have families and students to be a part of this very important work. This will also serve as an advisory. This will be an opportunity for folks to come together. We will study together the latest research, articles. We will review information both in our district, across the state, across the region, and nationally to identify the most important possible solutions to help us in our efforts of addressing any inequities that we may have within our district. Dr. Putnam mentioned earlier this evening that we want to bring our families together. We want to host community conversations and listening campaigns. So you see dates here. These dates represent our community conversations. It will be an opportunity for us to share our district priorities. We will define terminology so that there's clarity across the district around terms that we're using. We want to provide opportunities where we can learn and grow together as a community. As far as our listening campaign, the goal here is to listen to the voices of our community. We will invite our families and community members to share information and to ask questions. We will be developing a structure that will allow us to provide responses so that there'll be an ongoing opportunity for that two-way communication. And then last but not least, we wanted to share the idea of regular progress updates. So as we are doing things in district, we will be communicating these things with our families, with our community. We will be sharing regular updates. And this is, of course, including updates relative to our curriculum, but also our workforce diversity, our professional development, and how we plan to create and sustain our welcoming and affirming environments. And one of the things that I'd just like to highlight here is that diversity, equity, and inclusion is the overarching umbrella for all things that we will do in our district. And so it will be a thread that is woven throughout all of our departments and all of our work moving forward. Thank you. I'm going to pass this to Dr. Putnam.
So, Tasha and Leslie, thank you very much for putting that together. And I love the fact that the purpose here is to continue to educate our community and also invite them in to continue to have these conversations. And the fact with so much misinformation sometimes is that it's rooted back into the New York State standards, the framework for New York State education. And thank you, Leslie, for mentioning you met with the parent and around the fact of we're doing this stuff. As an educator, when I look at culturally responsive teaching, and it's about knowing your kids, it's good teaching. So I'll turn it over now to Dr. Driffel, who's going to give us our business updates and walk through the pieces of our business reorg.
Thanks, Dr. Putnam. Good evening, Board of Education. Good evening, guests. Good evening to those watching remotely. The first meeting of July is the first meeting of the year for the Board of Education. It's the first meeting of the fiscal and academic year 2021-2022. So at this meeting, it's tradition that we have a host of reorganization items that set the table for the board's business for the rest of the academic year. So I won't go through the entire list of reorganizational items. Suffice it to say there's a proverbial laundry list, but I will point out some of the top items of mind as we understand how the Board of Education works. So number 2 on this list is the appointment of advisors, firms, officers for the Board of Education to consider for approval for this evening. That is our general counsel, special counsel, bond counsel, our municipal advisors, our purchasing agent, district clerk, everything related to records, insurance consultants, architects, our 4-town tax receivers, our external, internal auditors, our Title IX folks, our ADA folks, our DASA folks, and so on and so forth. There's a couple different appointments just within that number 2 bullet, so I wanted to separate those out a little bit. Number 5, designation of consortium representatives. If you don't know, the school district participates in a number of consortiums where we mitigate risk with local county school districts for health insurance and for workers' compensation insurance. We're required by law to bond certain employees that have access to sensitive financial information. The superintendent of schools certifies payroll. Treasurer serves as signatory authority. Petty cash funds are distributed at all of our 6 schools and also at district office and our bus garage. Similarly, change funds are utilized for food service department, libraries, and athletics. Superintendent can approve budget transfers up to $15,000. Board members are to attend professional learning. Superintendent must approve overtime. We are required to designate the district's primary bank for our official business. We are also required to designate other banks depositories where we may seek additional investment opportunities. We are required to designate our official district newspapers. We're supposed to have 2. Our 2 are the Daily Record and the Rochester Business Journal, and when not available, we utilize the Democrat and Chronicle. We reauthorize all of our student clubs on an annual basis. The business official is allowed to issue tax refunds when the assessment offices at the town have clerical errors up to $3,000. We're establishing fees for facilities use for the year. There's no changes to that fee schedule in accordance with our board regulation. I'll skip down a little bit. We are participating in the National School Lunch and Breakfast Program. I'm happy to report that the USDA does have a waiver in for the 21-22 school year that will extend free lunch and breakfast for the entirety of the 21-22 school year. So we'll have more information on our food service budget at our next meeting, but I wanted to bring that good news forward. Skipped one. The superintendent is authorized to approve capital change orders, but those ultimately come back to the board after the fact for your approval as well. As I mentioned, board gives the superintendent the responsibility to contract for special education services. Treasurer can legally invest school monies. We have authorized users in your board packet tonight for any purchasing cards associated with our different vendor partners. Penfield continues to participate in Section 5 athletics. The superintendent can submit grant applications. Board president will sign legal documents when required. We appoint a physician for the purpose of physical examinations and drug testing for bus drivers. We authorize the school district to participate in cooperative bids, primarily through BOCES, but through other piggybacking arrangements as well to secure best local pricing. Superintendent can approve contracts up to $20,000 with third-party vendors. We utilize the IRS mileage reimbursement rate for any district business. It's currently 56 cents a mile, but that usually changes come January 1st, and then we'll adopt that. CSE, CPSE committee members are listed in your packets. Education hearing officer, independent evaluation compensation rates, CSE referrals, student attendance keepers are listed. We established rates for translation services, fingerprinting authorization per SED rules, equipment surplus authorization in alignment with board policy. The ERS, the New York State Local and Retirement System, requires us to have a standard workday resolution that defines how many hours in a day certain titles work for their service credit for that retirement organization. Establish bus use fees for any third-party agencies that seek to use our buses or drivers. Professional Development Committee, qualified lead evaluators for evaluations of instructional personnel, IEP changes, a readoption of all policies, regulation, codes, and plans, BOCES extended school year transportation contract, and last but not least, curriculum writing projects can be authorized by the superintendent of schools. Board, you have some other regular business this evening to consider. We have project change orders for both of our capital projects that are currently ongoing. So we have a 2018 capital project and a 2019 capital project. Within those change orders, there were a couple credits back to the district, and then the rest were for both owner changes and architect changes, field conditions that were unforeseen, or some upgrades that we wanted to make in accordance with the budget. You'll know, the folks that are here, that sorry about the staging area outside in the parking lot. The high school roof work is going on. If you've checked our Twitter account, you'll know that the new turf replacement has been going in. We did a walkthrough on that today. It looks great. It's going to last us another decade or so. Addition school physician contract renewal is scheduled for approval. That contract does not actually expire until July 31st, but it will start again on August 1st and go another year. BOCES summer contract with Monroe One BOCES, and back in our May 25th meeting, we had a hearing for our district-wide emergency response plan that now, after 30 days of lapsing, requires approval by the Board of Education so we can get it submitted to the state by the required deadline date. So that was it for me tonight.
Thanks, Dr. Driffel. And we'll That is a first for clapping, but Dr. Driffel deserves every one of those claps. Thank you. And that's the reorg meeting for those who've never been there. It's a lot of things. This is the first meeting of the school year. This is our New Year celebration. And I'll turn it back over to, oh, I'm sorry, it's discussion. I apologize if there's questions.
Board members, any questions regarding the information Dr. Driffel just provided? No. Seeing none, let's proceed.
And I believe our last superintendent update is our learning plan, and I'll turn to Dr. Maloney.
So, Board of Education, you have received a copy of this year's district professional learning plan. It should look familiar because the plan is written for a 5-year encompassing plan from 2019 to 2024. And it's organized, if you take a look at the plan, it's organized by board goal and how as a district we will provide professional learning opportunities for faculty and staff to address each board goal. The Professional Development Committee, which is facilitated by our Assistant Director for Professional Learning, Sheena Conway, provides updates and revisions to this document on an annual basis. The committee is comprised of teacher, administrator, and parent representation, as well as higher education representation. As you will see, the appendices include multiple documents, the committee charter, the New York State Professional Learning Standards, and the district mentor and peer manuals. A huge thank you to my predecessor, Jim Pfeiffer, as well as Sheena Conway, for maintaining the document throughout the year. Myself and Tasha will be working through the document, updating for next year's.
Questions?
No more questions. Board members, any questions regarding the learning plan? All right, seeing none,
All right, so I will just note, and thank you to Dr. Maloney, and she mentioned Mr. Pfeiffer and Sheena Conway, because this does get, goes to the board, and, Leslie started officially July 1st, and I said, oh, by the way, first board meeting, you've got to present the professional learning plan that your hands weren't in as the brand-new assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction. So, but I appreciate that work, and something we'll continue to look at. So thank you. And that concludes superintendent reports.
All right, that brings us to the organizational items. It is recommended that organizational items 6A1 through 6A52 be approved for the 2021 school year.
So moved.
Yes.
Second.
So may I have a motion and a second that the items that you see in front of you, I'll get to the bottom here, the motion is second that the organizational items 6A1 through 6A52 be approved for the 2021-22 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Brings us to change orders. There we go. It's recommended that the board approve the change orders you have listed and provided to you. They have been reviewed by and are supported by architect Vic Tomaselli, project manager Gary Huffman, the clerk of the works George English, and the assistant superintendent for business and finance Dr. Dan Driffel. So may I have a second and a motion that the change orders be approved?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. It is necessary to approve the contract for the school physician, the contract terms and conditions. Dr. Robert Toot, thank you. For the 2021-22 school year, per the terms of RFP 18-10, the contract amount is $28,407.40, a 3% increase over the prior year based upon the PAC contract. Dr. Toot's contract runs August 1st, 2021 through July 31st, 2022. So may I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education authorizes the superintendent of schools or his designee to execute the contract between Dr. Robert Toot and the district for the 2021-2022 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. A contract in the amount of $143,043 was received from the Board of Cooperative Education Services for the transportation provided Penfield special education students for the summer school program in 2021. If the board approves, the following motion is in order. That the Board of Education authorizes the signature of the president to contract in the amount of $143,043 from the Board of Cooperative Education Services covering transportation provided Penfield students for the summer school 2021. The dollar amount is an approximation. The district will be billed for the actual amount of students transported and aids used. So may I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Approval of the district emergency response plan. Pursuant to the Commissioner's Regulations, Section 155.17E3, the district held the required public hearing for the emergency response plan on May 25th, 2021. It has been available for public comment for 30 days and must now be adopted by the Board of Education. May I have a motion and a second that the emergency response plan be approved as presented on May 25th, 2021, per the Commission's Regulations, Section 155.17E3.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. It's recommended that the board approve the following impartial hearing officer. On June 24th, 2021, board member Ms. Barb Babiards approved Ms. Lynn B. Amella, Esquire, as the impartial hearing officer in reference to student 001002357. Ms. Emily certified that the Commissioner of Education is certified by the Commissioner of Education to conduct the hearing regarding students with disabilities pursuant to Section 4404 of Education Law. The following motion is to confirm this appointment. So we have a motion and a second to appoint Ms. Lynn Emila, Esquire, as the impartial hearing officer in reference to student 001002357.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. It is recommended the Board of Education approve the New York State School Board's Code of Conduct. The New York State School Board Association has a code of conduct for school board members. School boards may approve it yearly as a reaffirmation and a show of support for the state code of conduct. So may I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education approve the New York State School Board's Code of Conduct.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. We are now at visitor speaking time. We as a board appreciate the comments of the community during public session of the board meeting. Every individual that speaks has a vested interest in the education of our students. Your comments are important to us. Matters involving particular individuals or specifics of negotiations are not permitted in public session. Concerns raised will be referred to the district administration for follow-up or actions when appropriate. A request to speak form must be filled out online by 10 a.m. on the day of the meeting. Speakers are expected to identify themselves with their names and addresses before presenting and limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. A total of 30 minutes will be scheduled for visitor speaking time. The board will not be responding to comments during the session, but please be assured we are listening. Finally, we ask all speakers to model the conduct we expect from our students in school daily. Please be respectful of others in your words, conduct, and demeanor. Thank you. Our first speaker is Aaron Hart. And you just come down to the microphone at the table, please.
Hello, I'm Aaron Hart. I live at 432 Landing Road North. I have 3 kids that have been in the schools since 2003, well, we're just finishing up. I watched last month's Board of Education meeting with embarrassment and sadness. I listened to negativity and anger directed towards the people working in the Penfield School District during the comment portion of the meeting. My suspicion and belief is that within our school district, there's a silent majority of people who are thankful and appreciative of the work going on in the district. I would like to take time to thank the board, the school administration, teachers and staff for their work. I know I speak for many in the district. I assume I speak for the majority. My kids have benefited from being in Penfield schools and being exposed to all sorts of people. Gun owners, transgender folk, hunters, people who will be unable to live independently in their lives, committed athletes, people without the ability to walk, pacifists, people who hate people they do not know, welders, and people who went to study at Ivy League universities. What a mixed up group of views and opinions within these people. It seems to me a most difficult job to make decisions that affect all of these people at once. To all the people working in the district, thanks for trying. I hope that I thank you also by providing you with what you need to do a great job. We support you with our taxes, we support you with by supporting our own children's learning, and with our own unpaid volunteer efforts. For 9 years, I showed up every month at Indian Landing dressed as a giant eagle, for goodness sake. We are all in this together, and we succeed together. I have learned over the years that the board and the school are not here to take care of my concerns. They are here to take care of our concerns, our community concerns. Sometimes the board does not see things the way I do, and that really makes me upset. I try to lay out as plainly as I can what I'm thinking, and then I get back to work doing the hard day-to-day job of nurturing our kids' needs. In this moment in time, while I can, I would simply like to thank you all for your efforts that help me, my children, and my neighbors.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Next up is Mr. Rich Tyson. Mr. Tyson,
Sure,
please
you don't
state
have
your
to move
name
the
and address.
microphone tonight. You don't even have to move the microphone tonight. Yeah. So I don't like to read written statements. I prefer to just have a dialogue, but trying to stay to 3 minutes, I'm going to be respectful of that time frame. So I trust that going forward, we're never going to see such clear signs of disrespect from board members towards those of us who also volunteer to come and participate in this process as we did last month. We who volunteer our time to come speak are often the actual parents of the students within the district that you control. Secondly, what started the blatant signs of disrespect last month from certain board members was a parent's concern that a certain board member, unnamed per your rules, may have potential ties to Pathstone. It was asking why Penfield had not dropped its relationship, as did Fairport and Pittsford. Since then, Penfield has dropped its relationship with Pathstone, according to Dr. Putnam's email, and an existing board member has taken on the role of Director of Development with the organization, according to an update on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. Call me conspiratorial, but what it looks like is that the father was absolutely correct in the possible conflict of interest that he had. Penfield reacted by quickly dropping Pathstone, and that board member was able to come forward and acknowledge that they had in fact taken on the role within that organization. So what happens next? Without any communication with the community, you opted to change the procedures for how people can come and speak to this body, as I'm doing this evening. Your response to parents asking for more dialogue and transparency is to shorten the amount of time that we have before this body to present our thoughts and to cap the time period overall each month, limiting the number of potential speakers. Are you concerned that we're going to expose more potential conflicts of interest? Do you fear community oversight of this board and this body? It appears that what we have is a board and an administration that is adversarial to the very people that have students that are involved in this education system that you're controlling. For that, I hereby request that my child's classroom next year have a video camera in it that's recording all that's being taught each day so that I can review with her. You have lost my confidence as a parent, and you have the best interest of my child in mind. It is your own lack of transparency and your refusal for dialogue that has created this situation. To be very clear, this has nothing to do with a concern over the teachers in this district. Many of us feel that they are also at the mercy of this board, administration, and New York State guidance. Continuing on the topic of transparency, when are we going to be able to see the results of the equity audit that was conducted months ago at this point? My wife and I participated, and there has been literally no follow-up with any of us that did, advising as to what the results were. Why are we hiding them? Why are they not public yet? Lastly, for those of you who claim that we are just a bunch of parents upset over your obsession with DEI and the like, you have caused the problem. Many parents I meet with feel that they were literally lied to by the administration when they approach them with concerns. Your continued refusal to engage in meaningful dialogue with the community leads us to wonder what you're hiding and creates confusion about what your goals truly are. You, again, are creating these problems. We're starting to fight back against a system that we're forced to pay for, whether it works for our students or contradicts lessons that we are teaching at home. We will not stand idly by without a fight for our children and the education that they receive. You have the power to fix this by hearing what we say and responding in a way that demonstrates that you want us at the table. Your failure to do so will only result in more frustrated parents showing up here every month to be heard, and the biggest push you've ever seen in Penfield over the next 2 election cycles to make sure that there's a new majority on this board. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Tyson. Next is Darren Yell. Mr. Yell, please state your name and address.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Darren Yale, 127 Willow Pond Way. I've lived in Penfield, born in Penfield. I've been to Penfield, graduated from Penfield High School, proud member of the community, and a parent as well. I'm new to this whole process. It seems a little bit odd to me as a business owner of almost 20 years, being in a forum where I can meet with people and ask questions and don't get answers. And I've been coming to a couple of board meetings, and my whole purpose of being here is just the transparency. There's been a lot of questions asked with no answers returned and a lot of lies, and I'm just here to just voice my concern. Just to piggyback on the very first speaker here, I do want to thank all of you, and I appreciate you for working on behalf of the community as our elected volunteers and tax-funded school officials. So thank you for being our guests here today. I have some important questions that may not be as simple a yes or no, and I know I'm not going to get any back and forth here at this meeting, but I would really look forward to hearing back from the board. Because concerned parents and taxpayers deserve to know where you all stand on some very important issues. This is just a few. If I had more than 3 minutes, I'd certainly take more than that. But first of all, I appreciate the presentation on the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the rewording of critical race theory into something other than that. My question about that is, have you considered, or will you, actually it's more of not even a suggestion. I'm really kind of demanding that the board, this community gets polled on what our culture is. We just saw a definition of what culture is. Do you know my culture? Do you know anybody in this room's culture? So one of my questions is, do you, as a board member, do you believe that because I have a lighter skin tone, I was born into privilege? I would love to know what everybody thinks about that. I think a lot of the taxpayers and a lot of the parents would like to know what the elected officials believe on that topic. It's a tough topic, but it's something that I believe that taxpayers and the parents need to know. How many of you believe or think that our kids should be taught that Black Lives Matter is a social justice group versus a hate group? I think it's a tough question. It's something that needs to be discussed. I would like to know everybody's opinion. How many of you think that it's right to be teaching our kids that we have a systemic racism problem in this community?
Thank you, Mr. Yell.
And how many of you
Thank you, Mr. Yell. Your 3 minutes has expired.
Spike protein injection.
I'm reclaiming the floor, Mr. Yell. Mr. Yell, I'm reclaiming the floor. Thank you. All right, next up is Lily Nicosia. Hello, Ms. Nicosia. Please state your name and address.
My name is Luli Nicosia, and I live at 12 Seton Court. I'm here this evening to represent a group of Penfield parents and residents, some of whom are here in the auditorium today. And we're here to offer our overwhelming support for the district's anti-racist curriculum. In the New York State Guidelines for Culturally Responsive Sustaining Education that Dr. Putnam shared in a recent email with the district and that was covered in this meeting, it states that the guidelines are grounded in a vision of an education system that aims to create students who experience academic success, who are socio-politically conscious and socio-culturally responsible, and who have a critical lens through which they challenge inequitable systems of access, power, and privilege. We wholeheartedly support this vision and look forward to hearing about the culturally responsive lessons that you'll be implementing based on this vision and this framework. We are also thrilled to welcome Tasha Potter as the Assistant Superintendent of Equity and Access and would like to thank the board for creating this new position, as well as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Core Committee to address these important and essential initiatives in our district. We would also like to issue a warm welcome to Kristen Harley as a new recently elected board member. We look forward to her important contributions on this and a host of other topics during her tenure on this board. We're here today not only to support the work you're all doing on the anti-racist curriculum, but to also recognize that this last year has been extremely challenging for all of you, the Board of Education members. In a recent article on HuffPost.com that was entitled "Tears, Politics, and Money, School Boards Become Battle Zones," the opening line reads, quote, "Local school boards around the country are increasingly becoming cauldrons of anger and political division, boiling with disputes over such issues as COVID-19 mask rules, the treatment of transgender students, and how to teach the history of racism and slavery in America," unquote. We know that many of these topics have also made your recent meetings more contentious, so we wanted to show up tonight to extend our sincere appreciation for your dedication and time as volunteers for our kids and our community. We thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Nicosia. Next up is Kristen Turgeon. Good evening, Ms. Turgeon. Please state your name and address.
I'm Kristen Turgeon. I live at 67 Cobbles Drive with a lot of loud children. This is much quieter to be here. Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I want to make clear that I'm a spokesperson for a large collection of parents from schools across this district. These words are not mine alone. They are all of ours. We are parents of children of all races who attend Penfield schools. We are here to speak to the hearts and minds of every professional that works in our district. We are here to be heard by building and district leaders and the esteemed Board of Education members we've elected. Perhaps more importantly, we are here to be heard by the very students who attend our schools. We just celebrated our nation's 245th anniversary. Many of us right at Harris Whalen Park with our families. We celebrated knowing how great a nation this is, while also recognizing how far we still have to go. Pride and a desire to be better are not opposing values. We stand before you feeling a similar way about the town of Penfield and the school district therein. Our town is America, very much a microcosm of much that is right and much that remains wrong with our country. We know that our town, like most suburban communities in the greater Rochester area, was very much part of the problem of purposeful racial segregation many decades ago. We know this, and yet we are proud to call this community home. Seeing the wrongs in our world does not equate to seeing no right. That is why we are here tonight, here to commend Dr. Putnam, his leadership team, along with the building leaders for efforts that they have made over the past several years to engage the long overdue work of cultural responsiveness and the creation of safer and more equitable educational opportunities for all Penfield students. We are the parents. We are here to express our continued support for this most challenging work. The author James Baldwin once said, "The challenge is in the moment, the time is always now." This is true no matter how difficult the challenge is, no matter how imposing politics or opposition, no matter how powerful the mechanisms of misinformation are. The time is always now. We want to publicly acknowledge some important steps this district has taken to become better for our children. Conducting a comprehensive equity audit of district structures, systems, and processes, creating a district-wide PAB DEI committee, developing seat committees in individual schools, recently working with parents and community members to create a powerful Juneteenth celebration, exploring major curricular shifts in an effort to paint a truer picture of our past, locally and nationally, curricular shifts that reflect the new SS framework, next-gen standards in ELA, and more. Broadening of CRE professional development opportunities for teachers and staff, including book studies on the groundbreaking work of Zaretta Hammond, joining the Regional Equity Network, creating an assistant superintendent position to oversee equity and access, creating mechanisms for our students of color at PHS to speak their truths and create a much-needed Black Student Union, developing a candidate nomination process in an effort to increase the number of applicants from underrepresented groups for positions in this district. These are all positive steps, and we know that they did not come without apprehension, discomfort, fear, and the resistance and opposition I mentioned earlier. We applaud Dr. Putnam and this board's willingness to do the work that must be done, the work that is long overdue here, as it is across our great nation. We are also here to push for more.
Thank you, Ms. Turgan. Our next visitor is Brian Nazinski.
I'll take a spot. Too late.
Good evening, Mr. Nazinski. Please state your name and address.
Brian Nazinski, 29 Hilltop Drive. There's some sensitive white people here tonight. We believe Penfield needs to consider holding more parent information nights for people who live in our community, who may not understand why this work must happen. This is not just from a social standpoint, but includes the release of the culturally responsive sustaining education framework from the New York State Education Department. We stand before you without judgment of anyone who may be at a different point in their learning. We offer our help in educating them as to the reason for this work and will support any such plans Dr. Putnam comes up with. We are not here to condemn our neighbors, but we will not be outshouted by them either. Let's find ways to address concerns, answer questions, support their learning in a way that does not impede our progress. I'd ask you all to listen to this message that comes directly from the framework. For more than a century, education providers throughout the United States have strived and struggled to meet the diverse needs of American children and families. A complex system of biases, structural inequalities is at play, deeply rooted in our country's history, culture, and institutions. This system of inequality, which routinely confers advantage to and disadvantage based on linguistic background, gender, skin color, etc., must be clearly understood, directly challenged, and fundamentally transformed. The New York State Education Department has come to understand that the results we seek for all our children can never be fully achieved without incorporating an equity and inclusion lens in every facet of our work. This understanding has created an urgency around promoting equitable opportunities that help all children thrive. New York State understands that the responsibility of education is not only to prevent the exclusion of historically silenced and disenfranchised groups, but also to assist in the promotion of cultures, languages, and ways of knowing that have been imperiled by years of oppression. This is from our state education department. Let's not be behind in this work. Let us be the district that is ahead leading this work. We believe this district needs to strategically plan for broader professional development for the staff of our schools. The offerings that currently exist have value, but until time is devoted to teach all of our staff, the district is simply offering optional learning opportunities. Every district must devote time to their staff for training like mandatory sexual harassment, hazardous chemical, and more. Why not also for cultural responsiveness, which will undoubtedly benefit all Penfield students? As we have expressed to Dr. Putnam in the past, staffing and hiring has to be better. Efforts to recruit and retain professionals from underrepresented groups, including people of color, must be improved. Our staff demographics are far from reflective of our student demographics. Every child deserves to see professionals that look like them, and every child deserves to have the opportunity to learn from a diverse staff more reflective of our country's fabric. These concerns have also been shared with Dr. Kenny as he begins in his new role. In closing, we commend the steps that have been taken and offer our support, energy, and vigor to the ongoing efforts and those which have not yet begun. There is so much work to be done in this community and the district to achieve the vast potential that Penfield has. Pride and a desire to be better are not opposing values.
Thank you, Mr. Nazinski. Our next visitor is Nicolette Ferguson. Good evening, Ms. Ferguson. Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Nicolette Ferguson, and I live at 805 Corwin Road. I am a Penfield parent, a community member, and a founding member of the Penfield Anti-Racist Alliance, also known as PARA. I am addressing the board on behalf of myself, as well as the members of PARA, many of whom have joined me here today. This past year has been like no other year we have ever lived through. The two pandemics, COVID-19 and racism, have been at the forefront of our lives, forcing us all to face difficult truths and grapple with how we form our society, particularly how we want the world to look for our children. Like many other districts, businesses, and organizations, Penfield engaged in the United Way's 21-day Racial Equity Challenge and engaged in the PTA Parent University conversations led by Penfield parent and author Nicole Doyley. We saw diversity, equity, and inclusion committees formed in each school building. A Black Student Union, also known as BSU, was reinstated in the Penfield High School with an African American advisor, Ms. Kimberly Brown. A district-wide virtual career night during Black History Month celebrating Black excellence, which also featured our mayor-elect Malik Evans. And most recently, a parent university and district-sponsored virtual Juneteenth celebration, which acknowledges the federal holiday that was recently signed by our current President of the United States, Joe Biden. Moreover, Tasha Potter is the first African American named to the newly created position of Assistant Superintendent of Equity and Access. Change has begun, but the work is far from over. We still have school buildings where people of color are not employed, and students of color are unseen, unheard, and unsupported. I and others are here tonight to speak up and support an education and a community that is reflective of the world we live in. With that in mind, PARA continues to demand the Penfield School District put the following at the forefront: a school district that actively recruits and retains diverse faculty, staff, and administration, a school curriculum for every grade level which reflects and educates a complete American history, acknowledging past and present traumas caused by systemic racist policies and practices. Ongoing anti-racist professional development for faculty staff.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. Our next visitor is Brian Growney. Good evening, Mr. Browney. Please state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Brian Growney from 19 Finchwood Lane. Last time I spoke, I accused a school board member of having direct ties with Pastone. After I was done speaking, a different board member yelled a profanity at a parent, and everyone witnessed what happened after that. What shocks me most about the aftermath of this event is that the board member was allowed to carry out his term and put out a public statement accusing parents of bullying the board. It is disappointing to hear silence from the rest of the board members on that statement. My duty as a parent is to advocate for my children when inappropriate content is put in front of them. Stating facts, asking for transparency, and asking questions in a respectful way does not make me a bully. Note that the member I originally accused of having direct ties with Pastone has since accepted a job there. Although the school has canceled the Pastone courses, I question whether it was because of the school board members' conflict of interest or because they disagreed with the content. The Penfield's DEI website makes it seem like they will be focused on teaching students about the color of the skin they were born with and their unconscious bias or being a victim because of it. I am also worried what type of sexual education will be rolled into the elementary schools next year. I don't know what to expect with the school's lack of transparency. At this point, the administration has created an environment where I don't feel comfortable sending my kids. I'm very thankful for the Scribner staff, teachers, and principal for everything they have done for my children. However, the social reforms being implemented across all grade levels, K through 12, are being driven by an administration I do not trust. For these reasons, I am pulling my kids out of the school next year. I want my children in a school that is teaching positive messages, not one that is teaching them to think differently based on their skin color. I hope more parents start paying attention to what is happening within the school. It would be nice to see our public school as a safe place where I feel comfortable sending my kids again. My job has taken me all over the world, including Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa. I feel blessed for the opportunities to be immersed into different cultures. The one trip that stands out most is my trip to Juba, Sudan before it split. There I was getting to know a Sudanese gentleman who had told me that he had 6 kids because he hoped one of them would live past the age of 16 to carry on his legacy. I have other stories like this throughout my travels, which makes me feel very blessed to live in a country with a unique government that has a strong police force and military to protect our freedoms. I want our children to be going to a classroom that doesn't teach them differently. Freedom is something that I've been thinking a lot about lately and feel like Ronald Reagan said it best. Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Growney. Our next visitor is Sandra Ryan. Good evening, Ms. Ryan. Please state your name and address.
Sandra Ryan, 11 Saybrook Drive. I signed up to talk about critical race theory, but it turns out that you're doing culturally responsive sustaining education, which I think is good. But I think I will talk about critical race theory, because that's what I came to talk about. Critical race theory, what does it mean? Is it self-explanatory? No. Critical. Does it mean a thing of critical importance? Or something we need to be critical of? Something we need to be scrutinizing? What? Race. What race? What about race? Theory. An idea. That is what a theory is. Critical race theory is, we are told, a way to eliminate racism. It is, we are told, anti-racism education. But everything that I have seen in critical race theory is not anti-racism, but anti-whiteism. That's right. Yeah. According to critical race theory, white people are evil, oppressors, who should be atone for their sins of themselves and their ancestors. This is what they want to teach our children in critical race theory. If you are white, you are an oppressor and are bad and should be ashamed and sorry for being white. I would not be surprised if it results in a white kid saying to their mother, "Why did you marry a white man?" Because the white men are the worst. "Why didn't you marry a black man so I would not have this awful color of skin?" And they would be ashamed and know themselves to be not good because they have white skin. My family does not want this for our children, and we will be closely monitoring the school program and advocating for our children. We will also provide a balance to what is taught, such as Africans have enslaved other Africans since the distant past and sold them to anyone who would pay. And it is still going on in Africa for sale or for ransom. Equity, mentioned often. What is equity? Equity is not equal opportunity. It is you both get exactly the same thing, no matter what you do. If you work hard, you get the same thing as somebody who doesn't work. That's communism. Look at Cuba, look at Venezuela. That's equity. Doesn't matter, same thing. For school, it's like no child left behind. If in 3rd grade, one child reads on the 1st grade level, that's what all the children will do. So we all sink to the lowest level. Not good. And my family is for equal opportunity, not equity. That's right. Equal opportunity for all. And that's it. I'm done.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan. Our next visitor is Elsa Wheat. Good evening, Ms. Wheat. Please state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Elsa Nielsen Wheat, and I live at 20 Aikenberry Drive. I am a Penfield alum, a mother of 2 elementary-age children, and I've been an educator for 20 years, 6 of which I'm proud to say have been in Penfield. I want to thank the board and Dr. Putnam for your dedication and hard work over the past 18 months. These have been some of the most challenging in my teaching career, but knowing I had your support allowed me to teach and care for my students as I always have. I also came here tonight to affirm my support of New York's culturally responsive sustaining framework and Penfield's dedication to creating a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment for all students. I am committed to designing learning experiences that cultivate the engagement and curiosity of culturally, linguistically, and racially diverse students. Research tells us that the best student learning outcomes are achieved when we motivate and engage, facilitate opportunities for critical thinking and problem solving, center student identities and interests, and promote a sense of safety and belonging. I want to encourage you to remain true to moving forward with these initiatives and communicating clearly to the community so that the misinformation campaign does not prevail. I ask that you continue to stand by me and all teachers as we do this important work. I'll close with a quote from a personal hero of mine, the poet Maya Angelou. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Thank you for giving me the time and space to share my thoughts. Welcome to Miss Potter. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to work with you and learn from you. I am very proud to be a part of Team Penfield.
Thank you, Ms. Wheat. Our next visitor is Colleen Regelsberger. Good evening, Ms. Regelsberger. Please state your name and address.
My name is Colleen Regelsberger. I live at 36 Lookout View, and I am a teacher at Indian Landing. I've been there since 1996. So, anyway, members of the board, Dr. Putnam, all of the district-wide administrators, Sheena Conway, a number of others who have supported us through what has been the most difficult, unusual year I can remember as an educator, and I've been at it a long time, and it's just was, I know, a constant for all of you to have to deal with constant changes and constant, the wondering that all of us were dealing with. And we really appreciate what you have done for us and how you've supported us and the kids and the families. I also want to welcome Tasha Potter. We're very happy to have this position for you and for you to work with us and teach us and for us to learn from you. And of course, Dr. Maloney and Dr. Kenny, welcome to your new positions, and we know you're going to do everything you can for us to move forward with the equity challenges that we face. And let's see. Thank you for ensuring that we will be teaching students accurate, inclusive American history that is part of the New York State curriculum. it is necessary to know the whole truth about historical events that have happened in the United States, that they have occurred and are relevant to every student that we teach. We encourage students to use their critical thinking skills to develop their own perspectives regarding these events. In order to better learn from our country's past transgressions, we need to make sure our students are made aware of them so that we can have discussions, listen to each other, talk to each other, kids, adults, families, and develop and listen to others' perspectives in a respectable and safe manner. And I believe that at all the schools in Penfield that this will happen and that we will keep students respected and safe. Students, school staff, families, and other community members must work together to make Penfield an equitable, diverse community. Thank you again for everything.
Thank you, Ms. Rakelsberger. This concludes visitor speaking time. Which brings us to President's remarks. We've heard through the board meetings, and we've received emails, allegations of conflict of interest. When we first heard this, we reviewed state law. State law is very specific on conflicts of interest, what constitutes a conflict of interest, what are allowable and inadmissible activities when a conflict of interest takes place. We discussed it with our counsel, Ms. Heinrich, and we have found that under state law, there is no conflict of interest. What I would also say is it would have been much better if we had been approached and said, we're aware of this situation. Does this represent a conflict of interest? And we could respond, we could investigate it and respond to you versus starting off with accusations. I mean, I think that's really the respect that everybody deserves, is understanding what's going on and then give everybody an opportunity to address it. So that's my present conflict of interest. So. All right, the next is new business, where we are going to, which is for the board to keep in mind what the committee assignments are for the benefit of the public. There's the committees include under the Monroe County School Board Association, the Executive Committee, Information Exchange, Labor Relations, Legislative and Steering. Under the New York State School Board Association, there's a legislative representative. And then we have subcommittees, which is the Board of Education Orientation and Policy, and then community committees, which are Audit, DEI Core, Facilities, Health and Safety and Sustainability. And then there's district liaisons for the non-public school liaison, and then as a whole, we do the PAB, PTA, PTO, and PTSA and boosters. So keep those in mind as we start making making those assignments for the next year. Is there any other new business? Seeing none, a motion and a second would be appropriate to adjourn at 8:30 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.